Okay, everyone, so welcome back. And next on BOW's Peace Camp, we have a very special session on BOW's history with the UN. We have Janice Alton, who will discuss the important role of civil society in the work of the UN. BOW's interaction has been going on with the UN since the 1970s. So this session will explore some of the highlights of this connection and our current annual trips to the UN in New York, which will focus on the very popular Commission on the Status of Women. So Janice is a longtime activist in the domestic and international peace movement focused on demilitarization, delegitimization of war, and the inclusion of women directly in all decision-making processes of peace building, from conflict prevention to reconstruction. She has conducted 20 study consultation lobbying tours for women to United Nations sites, initiated and coordinated many national women and peace conferences and international workshops. So at the very start of this hour, we actually have a song to play for you. Let me bring it up here. And can everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, sorry, it's just being a little bit slow right now.
Good.
ممكن تقفل du même endroit. I can hear you, Jerry, but I've got nothing on the mic.
Okay. In Kigali, she wakes up. She makes that choice. In Hanoi, Natal, Ramallah. In Tangier, she takes a breath, lifts up her voice. In Lahore, La Paz, Kampala. Though she's half a world away, something in me wants to say, we are one woman. You cry and I hear you. We are one woman. You hurt and I hurt too. We are one woman. Your hopes are mine, and we shall shine. In Wallace, she speaks the truth. She reaches out, then teaches others how to. In Jaipur, she gives her name. She lives without shame. In Manila, Sultan Hamburg. Though we're different as can be, we're connected, she with me. We are one woman. Your courage keeps me strong. We are one woman. You sing, I sing
Good.
Okay. What a beautiful song that you've shown us, Janice. And I just want to add too, we also have Marla Slavner, who will also be in this discussion, as well as Marla and Kasia have been on the trips to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women many times. So Marla is a woman of many interests and talents, and I can attest to that. And I think she also passed it down to Kasia as well. Her passion and commitment to caring and making the world a better place has seen her participation at the community, government, and board levels advocating for youth education, peace, gender equality, environment, arts and literacy, access to justice, elimination of violence against women and girls, human rights issues. She has facilitated restorative peace building circles to help divert youth from the criminal justice system, is a trained facilitator in trauma and transformational healing with the Capacitor World Network. And additionally, Marla is an accredited family court support worker for victims of abuse. Marla has been a member of the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace for the past 10 years or so. At least she has attended the Commission on the Status of Women at the UN for the past 8 years as a VOW delegate. So I will hand it over to both of you capable facilitators to lead the session on VOW's involvement with the UN.
Hey, thanks, Vanessa. And I think I'm going to go first, and then I'm going to pass it over to Marla. There are, let me see, 8, there are 12 of us on this call that I can see. Has everybody been to the UN at some point? No. I'm going to, pardon?
I have, that's Lynn.
Lynn, good.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to start by saying that if you haven't been, please take note that Voice of Women has this opportunity. We've been in a bit of a pattern the last quite a number of years to try to tap into the work of its Commission on the Status of Women. We have done a wider connection in the past, but it's easiest for us to concentrate on the Commission on the Status of Women. As Vanessa said, I've been at this for quite a while. I think our first formal trip to the UN was probably in 1980, and I was a participant on that trip, and the 2 Voice of Women members who organized that did a fine job, but they said, wow, that was a lot of work. And they looked around for somebody else who might want to take it on. And I was a fairly recent graduate at that point in political science. And I was very enthusiastic about the UN. So I said, okay, I'd like to try that. So that's been ongoing for quite a while. I thought I would ask you if you knew, well, we all know, I think, that the UN was founded in 1945. There were some representatives of civil society at that charter meeting when the UN was launched. I didn't look up the names of those groups. That would be interesting to refresh on. I know one of them was the Rotary Club, Rotary International, but it gives you a clue that right from the beginning, the UN was open. Their circle was not just governmental, but they did include NGOs, or now we sometimes say CSOs, civil society organizations. Well, one of those people at the earliest days of the UN was Eleanor Roosevelt. She was from this civil society sector. And you probably know something about her story, those of us that are engaged in human rights work, because it was a lot of Eleanor's energy that led to her leading the United Nations effort to examine the issue of human rights. And there was a Canadian lawyer involved in that process. Humphreys was his name. And at the end of that look, came out for the UN's approval, the Declaration on Human Rights, something I think most of us are quite familiar with. And part of the mechanisms that were identified in that document was that they should establish a commission. That work was so important that it needed a commission which would regularly review the status of human rights. And in her wisdom, Eleanor Roosevelt said, of course, we need a commission on human rights. But we all...
Janice, feel free to grab a glass of water if you want.
We all...
I know I've got mine right here just in case that very thing happens.
But we also need a commission on the status of women. She recognized very early that the human rights of women might, given the day, might get less attention. And so we give her the credit for launching this idea of establishing this particular body that we now pay a lot of attention to, called the Commission on the Status of Women. And if we look back at the shape that that took initially, and we look forward to see the shape that it is now, there was quite a difference. It began very small. Not every state went to the meetings that were called. I think there were 15 or 18 initially, and then it was bumped up a little bit. But it met, I think it was every 2 years, and they met for a short period of time. It might have been 5 days or so. And if we think about that profile of that very important body, now all of the UN member states are invited to come in and participate on its annual meeting, and that meeting is 2 weeks in length. And it produces some substantial outcomes each time, and with NGOs in the room or being consulted, there is some integration of NGO views into that final outcome document, annual outcome document. So it's the point I'm stressing is that it's a body which has grown, and it has grown in its interest globally among the member states, and it has attracted a huge following. I've mentioned the Voice of Women, but I'll just divert to tell you a little story. The Commission on the Status of Women until 1994 didn't meet in New York City. it met in Vienna. And Voice of Women, we organized ourselves to look at the work of the commission in Vienna. And I'm saying 1994. And I think we weren't the only non-governmental people in the room. There might have been two more. And the body in 1994 was certainly not the full membership body. It might have been, I don't know, 30 or 40 states that were there on that occasion. So that was an eye-opener for us about how little the work of the commission then was followed. And now if we look back, and I'm going to show you some pictures at the end, and I know Marla is too, there are thousands, thousands of non-governmental people or civil society organizations or individuals from civil society organizations that register to come. And it's, I think maybe the most I've heard is about 10,000. It might even be a little more. I'll just say, though, that although there is that tremendous interest, there is a barrier. And one barrier is to get a visa. And the UN doesn't help people get the visa. And because it's now, the body is now meeting in the United States, the visa hurdle or block is the US block. And it's become, it's not a resolved issue yet. So while there are huge numbers that apply to come, maybe half that number actually get on site. So we're very lucky as Canadians that we don't have that obstacle. Just a little aside, there is another commission within the UN which we were attracted to, and that's the Disarmament Commission, because of our core interest in disarmament issues. It typically meets in September, and it typically also meets in New York. So we used to, not very many of us, but we would gather ourselves up and try to be there for that commission meeting as well. And then there were on a couple of occasions that we were actually got to present briefs, which made us feel good. So they were paying attention to civil society. And then we thought, maybe we can combine these two. Maybe our role could be to try to insert our interest in disarmament issues into the work of the Commission on the Status of Women. So that's been our steady practice now for quite some time. It's also more budget friendly. It was, none of us had any external support to make 2 trips. So this is working out better. I missed some of the previous bits to the presentation, so I don't know whether anybody has mentioned the doomsday clock, which really underscores the urgency that we all still feel about the need to address the critical issue of getting rid of nuclear weapons. But the doomsday clock has been around for quite a while, and it was a device by scientists to try to alert the world to the hazard of nuclear weapons. and they set the hands of the clock at various times to indicate the level of the precariousness or not. So just fairly recently, the doomsday clock the hands of the doomsday clock were moved forward, and they now sit at 100 seconds to midnight. It moved from 2 minutes to midnight to 100 seconds. So I maybe don't need to go into the background of why it moved, but just to emphasize that interest of our organization in being part of the global effort to get rid of nuclear weapons, I think is quite real. I thought I'd tell you some of the highlights of the UN and its work on behalf of women. This is outside of the annual work of the Commission on the Status of Women, and that is that in 1975, I think, there was an International Year of Women, UN International Year, and that was quite exciting and quite successful. And at the end of that, the decision was made to hold a conference, a global conference on women. So that was the beginning of 4 global conferences to examine the status of women globally. So that song that we opened with, I think, gives you that feeling that we're not just talking here about Canadian women, it's women all around the world, and we do vary a lot in our circumstances. So the 4 world conferences on women unfolded between 1976 and 1995. And Voice of Women, I have to say, was present at each one of them. And the very first one was in Mexico City, and it was also the very first time that the outcome document of that conference, for the very first time, it linked women and peace officially in their documentation. So that's 1975, not so long ago, but we've come a long way since then. And in 1995, the 4th conference, which was held in Beijing, which maybe some of you are quite familiar with, that was actually the largest gathering of women ever, largest gathering of women in the world. And I've heard various figures. If I say 40,000, that might be a little high, but we're close. So we are part of a global movement of women, for sure. And we are within that big movement, and with all its diversity, we are part of a global peace movement too. So that when we go to the UN, our advocacy work on behalf of disarmament, I think, it's part of a very large picture. And sometimes, well, I was going to say we wish that element within the women's movement were much bigger and stronger, but we persevere, and part of our actions on the ground when we get to New York is to educate ourselves more fully on the functioning of the UN. That's a primary purpose. We we set up meetings with like-minded civil society groups that are on the ground in New York. And you might be interested to learn, if you haven't heard, we lobby, and we set up meetings in advance with primarily our Canadian government, which has an office, a UN office in New York. And we sit down, they invite us quite, we don't have to wring our hands to get in. They're very welcoming. And they give us a fair bit of their time when we do meet with them around a huge table at the Canadian mission, so-called mission, the office. And we present issues which are current for us related to disarmament. And just to emphasize a little bit about the lobbying efforts that we've made, we have made trips to other UN sites in Geneva and Vienna. And when we've gone to those places, and these were the days when we had a little bit of support funding from our Canadian government. So we had a very good team, and we did some very good lobby visits to quite a few governments: China, the Soviet Union, India, and so on. And one of the comments I remember from an Indian ambassador was, wow, this is so wonderful. It's terrific to have you here, because we have the feeling that we're working in isolation. So as Lynn was emphasizing, I think in terms of strategies and making connections, I think we can know that in general we are welcomed, and those that are working on the inside are not pushing back against us, but they rather welcome our knowledge and our knowledge of our interest as well, which helps them, and in reverse it helps us. I think I'm going to not take too much longer because I've got some pictures I want to show you. But I can maybe just give you a couple of highlights of, in addition to that kind of interesting lobbying that we've now had under our belt. And I have to say, I think that contributed to what unfolded ultimately as Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. Has everybody on this call heard about that resolution? I think others have mentioned it. Yeah, Marla, see thumbs up there. Violet, maybe. So not everybody. That was in the year 2000 when the Security Council, and some of us were present for this debate, examined this resolution with all of its, I think, 18 articles related to women, peace, and security, and generally was emphasizing for the whole world. It's very important to, and some of the other speakers I think today said, to hear the voices of women and to consider their needs, and to understand that violence has different impacts on women. So we felt by some of our lobbying that we had been part of the awakening of governments to that unanimous adoption of that resolution. And And that resolution itself was largely crafted by civil society. Some of us have heard Cora Weiss tell the story of how that came about. So we that's a feather in our cap and a feather in the cap of many women who have been pushing along these lines of being included for quite a long time. I'll just give you a couple of other highlights, and one which I think Marla is going to tell us about a little more likely, was that we always put on workshops when we go to the UN to go to the work of the Commission, because there are two streams of work there. One is the governmental work, which we can sit in on and interact with to the best of the circumstances of the day. And because we are so many now, that opportunity is a little bit awkward, but it does happen in various ways. And there's another whole stream of work, which is what civil society or NGOs want to do at the time of the governmental meeting. So there's a whole block of parallel events that it includes us, and we try to participate in both. And one year, our Voice of Women workshop, which largely caters to the NGO community, but not exclusively, anybody, governments can come. We launched Kasia film, and Kasia had been coming with us to the UN at that point for, well, you can correct me, Marla, some time. Do you want to pipe in?
It was 2017, so it was 4 years already.
4 years by then. So we were very, very delighted that Kasia had been influenced by her time at the Commission on the Status of Women meetings, and that enthusiasm translated into this film. So we showed this film as our workshop contribution, and the room was packed, and Kasia got a standing ovation and an introduction to the event also by the Canadian, somebody from the Canadian mission. And another time we actually put on a play. So what you can find in this whole array of what non-governmental organizations contribute for the education of one another is quite rich. So it's a wonderful experience to go and get filled up in that way with all of these different approaches to working on the myriad of issues that are there before us. Our play was War on Trial. Sometime we should put that on again. We still have the challenge. And I guess the last thing that I'll mention is that this was not work exclusively around the Commission on the Status of Women, but non-governmental organizations who, like us, were very interested in getting rid of nuclear weapons, started to talk to governments in a very organized way, far beyond the time limits of the Commission on the Status of Women. And their mammoth efforts talking to other governments gave us what we now are so excited about, and that's the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. They lobbied taking the frame of the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons. And that was such an effective selling point that the UN General Assembly called a conference on the issue. And out of that conference, chaired by a very effective woman from Costa Rica, came this treaty that we've all been waiting for. So Vanessa, I see you wiggling a bit. So I think the time is probably of the essence, and I'm going to just wrap up there. And I'm going to, if I can do this right, I will share the screen and quickly show you some pictures. Let me see. There we are. No, that's somebody. Oh, you know what? I went out and then I came back in and I didn't load these pictures. So I'm going to skip those, and I'm sorry, because I have to maneuver a little bit and that'll take a little time. So Marla, I think I very happily pass the discussion and the input over to you. Thanks.
Janice. You gave such a comprehensive view, and that you have such a rich history prior to when you started bringing down the youth delegates. So 2013 Peace Camp.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Can you hear me?
That's better.
Yeah. So in 2013 at Peace Camp, I think it was the beginning, or it was 2012's Peace Camp, where it was the first Peace Camp with youth. And then in 2013 was the first delegation for the 57th Commission, I believe. So a few people from Peace Camp attended. Kasha was one of them. I was one of them because I had to be a chaperone. I had never been to the UN other than standing outside of it. I hadn't really been involved in VOW for that long. So it was really thrilling to be coming down with a group of women that were committed to the same things that we were committed to. And, I have to say, having never been there before, and everyone that we've brought, that we've seen enter the premises that have never been before, it's a life-changing experience. It really is. I think we see Violet on the call. She came down, Are you still there? Yeah, Violet and Melissa and
Yep.
a couple others. So one of the things that impressed the most was not only the subject matter that the UN was focusing on, but as Janice said, the breadth and depth of the presentations by civil society, and anyone coming from any point on intersecting the issues. I mean, it has everything from right to lifers on one end, to rights of prostitutes on the other, and and then peace and climate and indigenous issues, and everything, every single issue that affects women, because they all do. You'll find something there, around 600, and then the events. So just a dizzying experience for a newcomer, a dizzying experience for an old timer, because 2 weeks, you got to have energy. So you have to have good coffee. Well, we know the place, Ground Central at 2nd and 42nd. Apart from that, it's just a matter of how much can you take in. And no matter what you plan to do while you're there, you'll go to this workshop, but then you meet somebody in the lobby and you're having an amazing conversation. So that one went, never got to that one. You just seem to find where you're supposed to be at any given time. And this is, as Jen said, where Kasia got the inspiration to do a film. So we started at the UN in 2014. We left from New York on the day to leave for 6 months, and we came back, 3 years later with the film. It is that inspiring a place in terms of not the UN physically or institutionally, but the women that come and exchange ideas and collaborate and inspire each other. And we say that, every year it's like about February, we start to become really sluggish and almost burnt out, but then CSW is around the corner, and it seems to be our juice that revs us up and gets us, because activists need to feed, themselves and nurture. And this is a place where we just feel very nurtured and like-minded, and, with many groups, and from the grassroots right up to the high-level political forum. You can meet everyone from, one of the interesting things is an anecdotal story, which I don't have a picture. I was going to put it in, but then I didn't. But at the screening, after this woman came to us and she's like, that was my village. You filmed my village, right? And sure enough, we had been in this really remote part along the coast in South Africa that, happened to be her village. And she saw she saw how it was represented in the film, and she was really thankful. And so we have this buddy hug picture of us all together. So you just never know where you're, like we had gone out, come back, and then it took, showing it just to make another connection that we now have. And one of the highlights also for us is the morning meetings, although we hate getting up. I had to drag Violet's and Kasia's butt out of bed some of the mornings, and other people, it's like, come on, you're getting up at 5 a.m. and you're not coming home till 11 o'clock in the evening. And you're totally exhausted. But these morning breakfast meetings with the VOW delegation, where we sit around the table, and we also have guests like Cora Weiss, who was the author of the resolution 1325. And if she's coming to a breakfast meeting, we can get up and get to a breakfast meeting, right, Jana? And that's how we're just starting the day with incredible women, incredible exchange of ideas, because maybe half, some have gone to one Canadian thing that we had on the calendar, another is going to another, and then we kind of let each other know what transpired at any of those, or if anything interesting is coming up to go to. And the first part of the day is a little chaotic, because you've got a 9 o'clock call where things start, or an 8:30 call. So it's just go, go, go. But that's part of the excitement, right? Because something's happening. And that there's a bunch of noisy women that are also making things happen, right? And the connections are great. And we've met everyone from, again, this woman from a remote town, right up to the artisans in the market. They have an artisan fair, which I'll show you some pictures, and who are coming with wares, and those monies are helping support their journey coming. The sad part is that, yes, many years we've had to put place cards for women that didn't get their visas. So they put the little place cards on the table of where they would have been. Now, more and more with access to technology, they're doing the hybrid of zooming in virtually, but that didn't happen in the first few years that that's only something new. And also the UN has become wise to the fact that they were a bit of a stodgy institution. So they've done really cool things like have exhibits in the hallways and involve Hollywood and celebrities and all of that. So you never know who you're going to see through the halls as you pass. I also think that the Canadian delegations from various, not just ours, but the other Canadian delegations, are really interesting to meet while you're down there, right? Because coming from the West Coast, coming from mid-central Canada, from the East Coast, it's almost like a place where we'll see you there, right? Every year. And then you congregate in the lobbies, waiting for the Canadian representatives to show up for their daily briefings, which are usually very short and very useless, but that's another point. The meetings that Canada has with VOW are much more productive, as Janice said. And at one point there was an offshoot to, and this was a problem that young people didn't like, because they wanted to keep the voices of youth separate from the main conference. So they said, well, we'll have a youth CSW. It started off as a 2-day event on the weekend preceding CSW. Then it came down to 1 day, and I don't even think there is one now anymore. And they were good. I mean, the energy in the room was great. There were, a lot of youth. When we started going down, the youth contingency for delegates was very small, right? You see, but it's grown exponentially over the last 10 years. And so there is a very strong youth presence, which is now kind of woven itself into the main frame of the conference rather than as an offshoot, but still could be strengthened, in my opinion, in terms of the access that they get at the conference, right? So that's, and then with the hybrid model that they plan on coming back with, it could be stronger, because nobody really knows what's going to happen after the pandemic and when things are going to be back to normal, and if CSW will have the numbers or if they'll let that kind of numbers in again. Not quite sure exactly. But I think with the pandemic and the virtual, they had the most access, obviously, that they've ever had. They had capability for 25,000 people, which there's no way 25,000 people could descend on the UN, or even in the various, venues that surround the UN for the civil society, because those are pretty packed as well right now. Is there anything else I'm forgetting, Janice? And then I'll try to figure out how I get the screen sharing.
I think you've done a fine job. I'd go ahead with the screen sharing.
Okay, so hang on. So my desktop, okay. Okay, so can you see that, everybody? Yeah. Okay, so and these are just random pictures because we have so many, and I didn't want to bore you with just shots of the assembly hall or the smaller rooms, but there's all kinds of rooms, and it's, and then there's all kinds of beautiful art. That's a whole nother topic, like the country gifts to the UN, the big sculpture with the gun in a knot and the big globe outside, and the grounds have just gorgeous, really beautiful art and interesting art. This is a picture right here of part of the artisan market that they have every year. And you get a chance to meet the women who make the items and also support their journey, because many of them are selling it to pay for and underwrite the cost of their journey. Again, that's something that's very expensive in New York, is to not only make your way there, but find a way to pay for your way there. You know, it's not the cheapest city on the planet, as we know, which is why we usually get 4 or 5 in our room. It's fun, isn't it, Violet? This is another picture. Those usually happen like for a very short time period, so the room gets really packed. This is our friend at the Canadian Mission. He's no longer there, but that's Simon, right? And he is a friend of Voice of Women. He was very accommodating. This is Cora at a breakfast meeting that we mentioned. When you room with people, you become very close friends. So cute. They're cute. I take pictures. The graphics and the, you know, the photo ops for young people to do their Instagrams. There are very many. This is sometimes an event. They have some pretty cool events in and around, and this was one of the honors that we were able to meet Gloria Steinem and Lima Gabawi and Anne Wright and the women from Women Across the DMC. This was celebrating that trip that Janice took. And Senator McFedrin, who many of you know, but she's an ally and was on the board of Voice of Women for Peace. She leads an orientation that is very, very valuable for young people, everyone, but especially young people who've never been. She knows the process of the UN. And then she also did a consultation with youth, as well as some of the other politicians in Canada. So that was an exciting event. Let's see where I'm at right now. That's another one of those sculptures that I was talking about.
Nice. Good photo.
And that's the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Lima Gabawi from Liberia. You saw, and they now getting hip to the times, virtual reality, virtual exhibits, so that you can put yourself in the situation on the ground in developing countries or countries in crisis, that, you know, whatever the exhibition. Behind us, you'll see that there's a big wall of pictures, paintings. And you'll notice those are all the past secretary generals, men, still men to this day. There hasn't been a female. So we're waiting for that picture on the wall to change.
Working on it.
Working on it. Antonio Guterres is a good Secretary General, and the lobby is phenomenal for exhibitions and to learn and meander and just, you know, the grounds themselves. And then the webinars, webinars. I've been in the pandemic too long. The on-site presentations, yeah, they're webinars, I guess. It's just funny, I've coined webinars as a Zoom thing. Forgot that we actually used to do in person. But yeah, Val has put on some pretty incredible presentations, and with some really wonderful partners, and that's always a highlight that we go to. And this was the youth forum. They set up a special room, smaller assembly kind of space. This is a beautiful view from inside. I love it, so I put it in there. There's a lounge there that if we're lucky to get a chair, we can sleep. There was another, I guess that's it. I thought I put some more pictures in. Oh, there's this one. Okay, this is not a partisan commercial by any chance. This is Minister Monsef with the Liberals. So she had first attended the Commission on the Status of Women as a delegate with either the YMCA or someone. She was like one of us, right? Not, except for Rana, not in politics. And she was inspired to get into politics after one of the presentations, I believe, that Val did, and came home from that year of attending. I think it was the second year that we did, or third year we did, and she decided that she would get into politics and run. And so that's where she got her beginning. So how she became inspired, you know. She was, and then of course it made sense that she became, you know, the women's minister. So everybody has a journey of their own, but those were just a couple. So I hope you enjoy. How do I turn this off?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Janice and Marla, for talking about the Commission on the Status of Women and Val's history with it. I am definitely looking forward to hopefully going myself one day after talking about it. Yes, yes, hopefully in the next coming years. And I would just make a quick plug too that we do have consultative status with ECOSOC, and so we do an annual trip every year. So just keep that in the back of your mind if you've been inspired today. We usually open up applications around January or just before the new year to get started the process going for choosing who will come with us to the UN. So have that in the back of your mind if you'd like to join. We take about 20 women each year. So we encourage people, especially if you've been involved with VOW, that really goes a long way as to making your application more you know, better, a stronger candidate for coming with us, because we see that you're already active and interested in VOW's peace priorities. So thank you both for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. We will just have a couple minutes of break, and when we come back, we will be discussing the No New Fighter Jets campaign with Lane and Pitasana.